When that leather-bound Bible fell from the shelf and a folded piece of paper fell to the floor, I had no idea I was holding my own death warrant. 7 words written in familiar handwriting would transform me from a devoted wife into a woman fighting for her life. If she discovers the truth, eliminate her. What I found hidden in that house of lies would shock you. What I did next would save not only my children and myself, but the woman I considered my worst enemy. Subscribe to our channel to discover the secrets families hide and the strength that emerges when we refuse to be victims. Because what happened when I confronted the man who planned to kill me changed everything I thought I knew about betrayal, forgiveness, and starting over. Have you ever encountered something that made you realize your entire life was built on lies? My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I'm 76 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened in 1975, during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. The Vietnam War was ending, Watergate had shaken the nation's confidence, and women were fighting for equality in ways our mothers never imagined possible. But in our quiet suburb of Meadowbrook, Ohio, life flowed with the rhythm of Sunday services and Tuesday bridge games. I was 31 and had been married for 12 years to William Hayes, a man respected by everyone in town. He was the chief accountant at Meadowbrook Savings and Loan, always impeccably dressed in pressed suits, always carrying himself with the dignity inherent in being a pillar of the community. Our house was on Elm Street, a modest 2-story colonial with white shutters and a picket fence that I painted every spring. In the front yard, I tended a garden of pink roses and yellow marigolds that neighbors often complimented as they passed. Inside, everything was neat and clean, exactly what you'd expect from a banker's wife. We had 2 beautiful children. Thomas was 9, a bright boy who devoured books on astronomy and dreamed of becoming a scientist. Little Sarah was 7. An artistic soul who spent hours drawing elaborate pictures of fairy tale princesses and magical kingdoms. Back then, I was what they called the perfect housewife. Every morning, I woke before dawn to make William breakfast: 2 scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast with butter, and steaming black coffee. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen as I prepared his lunch and made sure his shirts were perfectly ironed. After everyone left for school and work, I spent my days cleaning the house until it gleamed, washing clothes that I hung on the line to dry in the sun, and sewing. My mother taught me how to use a Singer sewing machine when I was just 12. A woman needs skill in her hands, she always said, so she never has to be completely dependent on anyone. How prophetic those words would be. Have you ever felt like you were playing a role in your own life without ever questioning whether the script was real? To outsiders, we were the American dream come true. William provided well for us. We never lacked food, clothing, or shelter. He brought me flowers on our birthday, took the family to church every Sunday, and never raised his voice in public. But behind closed doors, there were long stretches of silence that felt heavier than words. William traveled frequently for work, especially on the second Thursday of each month. Banking business, he'd explain vaguely when I asked for details. I believed him because I wanted to. In 1975, questioning your husband wasn't encouraged, and I was raised to believe that the man of the house knew more about financial matters. There were other little things that should have made me suspicious. The way he quickly shuffled through papers when I entered his home office. The whispered phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The fact that he kept his desk locked and his personal affairs completely separate from his family life. You have a roof over your head and food on the table, he'd say, whenever I asked too many questions. That's all you need to worry about. One evening, as I was damming socks by the window, watching Thomas and Sarah play in the yard, I glimpsed William through the door to his office. He was hunched over papers, but there was something about his posture that seemed furtive, reserved. When he noticed me watching, he quickly closed a folder, and gave me one of his practiced smiles. "I'm just looking at some loan applications, dear, nothing that interests you." But I saw something in his eyes that night, a flicker of something that felt almost like guilt. The strangest thing is that he's become more affectionate in the last few weeks. More flowers, more compliments on my cooking, more generous with the household money. He even suggested we take a family vacation to Florida in the spring. "You've been a wonderful wife, Eleanor," he'd say, stroking my hair as we sat on the porch after dinner. "I want to make sure you know how much I appreciate everything you do." At the time, I thought he was finally recognizing my efforts. I had no idea he was saying goodbye. Do you believe that sometimes our hearts know the truth before our minds are ready to accept it? The morning that changed everything is October 15th, 1975. I remember the date precisely because it was the same day President Ford announced new economic policies that were broadcast all over the radio. William had left early for what he said would be a crucial meeting at the regional bank's Columbus office. The kids were at school, and I was home alone, battling a migraine so bad that bright spots danced in my vision. I tried my usual remedies, a cold washcloth, hot tea with honey, lying down in our darkened room, but nothing helped. I remembered that William kept strong headache pills in his office, medicines he'd brought back from a business trip to Chicago. The office was his sanctuary, a place where neither I nor the children were welcome without an invitation. But the pain was so intense that desperation prevailed over decorum. The door was unlocked, which was unusual but not unheard of when he was traveling. I entered the masculine space with its dark wood paneling, leather armchair, and shelves lined with books on banking and finance. The air held the scent of his cologne, mixed with pipe tobacco and something else I couldn't quite place. Something that reminded me of secrets. I knew the medicine was in the top drawer of his desk, along with other personal items. As I searched the drawer, a wave of dizziness hit me so hard I had to lean against the bookshelf. That's when it happened. My sudden movement caused several books to fall from the shelf, including the family Bible that had belonged to William's grandfather. It was a beautiful, leather-bound edition with gold lettering, more for display than reading, since I had never seen William open it. The Bible fell to the floor with a heavy thud and fell open, its yellowed pages spilling out, and from among those sacred pages, a small, folded piece of paper slipped out and fell at my feet. Have you ever had a moment when you knew that taking something small would change everything? My first instinct was to put everything back exactly as I'd found it. William would be furious if he knew I'd been in his office, much less if I'd tampered with his precious family Bible. But something about that piece of paper drew my attention like a magnet. With trembling hands, I picked up the note and carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. It belonged to Frank Morrison, William's boss at the bank and his best friend. I'd seen that same careful handwriting on Christmas cards and business correspondence for years. The message was brief, but it hit me like a physical blow. "Eleanor is getting too curious about your Thursday travels. We can't risk being exposed before the final transfer. If she finds out the truth, eliminate her. The plan is too important to let one woman destroy everything we've worked for." FM. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My legs gave way, and I sank into William's leather chair, staring at those words until they blurred through my tears. Eliminate her. Eliminate me. The migraine that had brought me to his office vanished, replaced by a cold, clear terror that sharpened every sense. Suddenly, William's recent kindness took on a sinister meaning. The extra affection, the generous household money, the talk of vacations, these weren't expressions of love. They were the guilt offerings of a man preparing to murder his wife. Have you ever realized that someone you completely trusted was capable of the unthinkable? With extreme care, I folded the note and placed it back exactly where it had fallen, between the pages of Proverbs. I replaced the Bible on the shelf and found the headache medicine, taking it with trembling hands. Then I went into the living room and lay down on the sofa, pretending to rest while my mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Who was we in Frank's message? What was this final transfer they mentioned? What truth was so dangerous that they were willing to commit murder to protect it? And most importantly, how much time did I have before William decided to act on Frank's suggestion? When William returned that night with Thomas and Sarah from after-school activities, I was putting dinner on the table as if nothing had happened. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans from our garden, all the normal, comfort foods of our family life. "How was your day, honey?" he asked, kissing my cheek in that absent-minded way that couples develop over the years. "Quiet," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice was. "I had a headache before, but it's better now." I watched his face closely, searching for any sign of guilt or suspicion, but saw only the familiar features of the man I'd shared my bed with for 12 years. How could someone look so ordinary while harboring such deadly intentions? That night, as I listened to William's steady breathing beside me, I made a decision that would save my life and my children's future. I wouldn't confront him directly. That might trigger the action Frank had recommended. Instead, I would conduct my own investigation, gathering evidence of any criminal activity they were planning while preparing for the worst-case scenario. The next few days were an exercise in acting. I maintained our normal routine, cooking William's favorite dishes, laughing at his stories, listening to the children talk about school. But beneath the surface, I was transformed into someone I'd never been before, a detective, a strategist, a woman fighting for her life. I started noticing details I'd previously ignored. The way William locked his desk drawer before leaving the house, the pattern of his Thursday absences, which I realized had been going on for months, the muffled phone calls that always ended when I walked into the room. Have you ever discovered that your life was completely different than you thought? A week after finding the note, I made my first real discovery. While ironing William's shirts for his upcoming business trip, I found a crumpled receipt in the inside pocket of his gray suit jacket. It was from a jewelry store in Columbus, dated just 3 days earlier. The sum was impressive, more than 3 times what William gave me for a whole month of household expenses. And the item I purchased gave me goosebumps, an engagement ring with a 1-carat solitaire diamond. William was never generous with jewelry. My wedding ring was a simple gold band, and the few pieces I owned were costume jewelry or family heirlooms. Who was this expensive ring for? In the same pocket, I found a small card with an address written in William's handwriting. I memorized every detail before carefully replacing the 2 items exactly where I'd found them. My heart was broken, but my resolve grew. Clearly, William had another woman, someone with whom he planned to start a new life after eliminating the troublesome wife who might expose whatever criminal scheme he and Frank were orchestrating. Over the next few days, I made excuses to drive to Columbus. I needed special fabric for a sewing project, I told William. I wanted to visit a cousin who was feeling ill. I was looking for a birthday present for Sarah. On my 3rd trip, I found the address on the card. It was a charming house in a nice neighborhood, much nicer than our modest home in Meadowbrook. I parked across the street and waited, unsure of what to expect, but knowing I needed to understand the full extent of William's betrayal. I didn't have to wait long. A young woman emerged from the house, visibly pregnant, with red hair and a sweet face that looked barely out of high school. She was watering flowers in the front yard when an older neighbor approached her. "How are you, dear?" the neighbor asked gently. "When will the baby be born?" "March," the young woman replied, her voice carrying easily through the quiet street. William says we'll be married by then, once he finalizes the divorce and settles some business matters. Each word was like a knife to my heart. William had told that woman, that child, that he was getting a divorce. She had no idea his business might involve murder. Do you think it's possible to hate someone and feel sorry for them at the same time? That day, I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The bigger picture was becoming clearer, and it was more horrific than I'd imagined. William and Frank were planning some kind of financial crime at the bank. There was a young woman, pregnant with William's child, waiting to become his wife. And there was me, the inconvenient obstacle that needed to be eliminated before their new life could begin. That night, I watched William read the newspaper at the dinner table, occasionally commenting on political events or local news. He seemed so normal, so trustworthy. How had I been married to a stranger all these years? As I tucked Thomas and Sarah into bed, reading them stories and listening to their prayers, I realized I was no longer fighting just for my own life. These children needed their mother to survive, to protect them from the consequences of their father's crimes. I kissed each of their foreheads and made a silent promise. I wouldn't let William destroy our family. Whatever he was planning, whatever danger I faced, I would find a way to survive and keep my children safe. But first, I needed to figure out exactly what crime he and Frank were preparing to commit. And I needed to gather evidence that could save my life if things went wrong. Have you ever had to become someone completely different to survive? The next morning, I began the most dangerous investigation of my life. I had perhaps days, perhaps weeks, before William acted on Frank's advice to eliminate me. Every moment counted and every mistake could be fatal. My first challenge was accessing William's locked desk drawer. I remembered seeing him hide the key months earlier when I asked about some bank documents. At the time, he mumbled something about it being the key to an old work file and quickly put it away. I waited until he left for work and the kids were at school and began searching methodically. It wasn't in the jewelry box, the coat pockets, or the briefcase. Finally, I found it hidden inside a hollowed-out book on financial planning. Ironic, considering he was planning the biggest financial crime of his career. My hands trembled as I unlocked the desk drawer. Inside, I found a treasure trove of evidence that confirmed my worst fears and revealed details even more shocking than I'd imagined. There were copies of bank documents showing a series of small withdrawals from dormant accounts belonging to elderly or deceased clients. William and Frank had been stealing for years, siphoning money in amounts small enough to go undetected during routine audits. But the big prize was yet to come. A memo dated just 2 weeks ago outlined their plan to intercept a large transfer of money destined for the new automotive plant being built on the outskirts of town. The transfer was scheduled for October 30th, just 2 weeks away, and the sum was staggering: $750,000. The plan was brutally simple. Frank would delay official processing while William diverted the funds into accounts he had created using false identities. They had already prepared new identity documents and purchased plane tickets to Argentina, where extradition laws would protect them. Have you ever had evidence that could destroy someone you loved? But the most chilling discovery was a letter addressed to William from someone named Victoria, the young pregnant woman I'd seen in Columbus. Reading her innocent and loving words, my heart ached for this girl, who had no idea she was involved with a criminal and a potential murderer. "My dear William," she wrote in careful handwriting, "it's only 2 weeks until we can truly begin our life together. I've already set up the nursery and can't wait for you to see how beautiful everything looks. I know it's been hard keeping our love a secret, while you've been going through the divorce process, but soon we'll be a real family. Be careful with the final details of your business arrangements. As Frank always says, if problems arise with Eleanor before the deadline, you know what needs to be done. I trust you to handle everything perfectly. All my love, Victoria. The words hit me like ice water. That sweet young woman wasn't just William's lover. She was unknowingly encouraging my murder. Frank had clearly discussed the Eleanor problem with them both, and Victoria, in her innocence, thought they were just talking about divorce complications. I photographed all the documents with a small camera I borrowed from our neighbor, under the pretense of taking photos for Sarah's school project. I carefully returned everything to its proper place and locked the drawer. Now I had proof of the embezzlement scheme, but I needed more than evidence. I needed a plan to survive and protect my children. That afternoon, I visited our family lawyer, Harold Stevenson, under the guise of updating our wills. During the conversation, I hypothetically mentioned what a woman should do if she discovered her husband was involved in criminal activity. Hypothetically, Harold replied with the careful precision of someone who has practiced law for 30 years. A woman like that should gather evidence, contact federal authorities instead of local police, and take steps to protect herself and her children before confronting anyone involved. His words confirmed what I already suspected. I couldn't trust the local authorities. Frank Morrison had too many connections in Meadowbrook. I needed to connect with people who couldn't be bought or influenced. Do you believe that sometimes we have to break the rules to do what is right? That night, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I waited until William was asleep and then snuck into Thomas and Sarah's rooms. I packed small suitcases for each of them, with clothes and essential medications, and hid the suitcases in my sewing room, where William never went. If things went wrong, if William decided to act before I could get help, I needed to be ready to run with my children at a moment's notice. The next day, I called the FBI's Cincinnati field office and asked to speak to someone about bank fraud. After being transferred several times, I reached Agent Patricia Coleman, a woman whose voice carried equal parts authority and compassion. "Ma'am, if you believe you have evidence of bank fraud and your life is in danger, we need to meet immediately," she said after I'd given her a carefully summarized version of my situation. "Can you come to Cincinnati today?" I made up a story about visiting my sister and drove the 2 hours to Cincinnati with the evidence hidden in my sewing basket. Agent Coleman was a professional woman, about my age, with kind eyes and a matter-of-fact manner that put me immediately at ease. "Ms. Hayes," she said after reviewing my photos and listening to my story, "you've uncovered a federal crime that goes far beyond simple embezzlement. The amount of money involved, the interstate elements, the use of false identities, this is a serious case." She explained that they would need to act quickly to prevent the October 30th robbery, but they also needed to ensure my safety during the operation. "We will place you and your children under protective custody immediately," she said, "and we will arrest William and Frank Morrison before they can carry out their plan or cause you any harm." Have you ever felt relief and terror at the same time? The plan was set for October 28th, 2 days before the robbery. I would maintain my normal routine while undercover agents watched our house. When William left for work that morning, federal agents would be waiting at the bank. But as I drove home from Cincinnati, a new worry consumed me. What about Victoria? That innocent young woman was pregnant with William's child and hoping to marry him. When the truth came out, her world would fall apart as surely as mine. Despite everything, the betrayal, the death threat, the lies, I couldn't stop thinking about that sweet, naive girl who had no idea what kind of man she'd fallen in love with. That night, as I watched William read his evening paper, completely oblivious to the fact that his criminal career would end in just 2 days, I made another decision that would change the course of many lives. I was going to warn Victoria. Have you ever risked everything to help someone who unknowingly hurt you? October 28, 1975, dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon, as if the weather itself knew what was coming. I made William breakfast as usual, kissed him goodbye as he left for work, and got the kids ready for school, all the while knowing it would be the last normal morning our family would have. Agent Coleman had stationed FBI agents at Meadowbrook Savings and Loan, ready to arrest William and Frank as soon as they attempted to access the transfer funds. But I had one more task to complete before this nightmare was over. After dropping Thomas and Sarah off at school, I drove straight to Columbus. I couldn't let Victoria hear about William's arrest from the news or the police. She was pregnant with his child, believing they would soon be married. She deserved to hear the truth from someone who understood what it was like to be deceived by William Hayes. I found her again in the front yard, this time raking autumn leaves, despite her advanced pregnancy. Up close, she looked even younger than I'd thought, maybe 22 or 23, with fair skin and confident eyes that reminded me of myself at that age. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her carefully. "Are you Victoria?" She looked up with curiosity rather than alarm. "Yes, it's me. Do I know you?" "My name is Eleanor Hayes," I said, watching her face closely. "I'm William's wife." The color drained from her face, and she dropped the rake. Her hands instinctively moved to protect her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from this unexpected revelation. "That's impossible," she whispered. "William said he told me he was divorced, that you left him years ago." "I've been married to William for 12 years, I said gently. "We have 2 children together, Thomas and Sarah, and until a few weeks ago, I had no idea you existed." Victoria sank onto the front steps, tears streaming down her face. "But he showed me papers, divorce papers. He said you'd moved to California and wanted nothing to do with him or Ohio." My heart broke for that girl, so young and so completely deceived. I sat beside her on the steps, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Victoria, you need to know more. William isn't just a married man lying to both of us. He's a criminal. He and his boss are stealing from the bank and are planning a big robbery today. The FBI is arresting them right now. Have you ever had to destroy someone's entire world to save them?" She stared at me in shock, her hands protectively over her pregnant belly. "No, that can't be true. William loves me. We're getting married. We're moving to South America to start over because he got a new job opportunity there." "South America," I repeated sadly. "Yes, that part is true. But not for a job, Victoria. To escape prosecution for bank fraud and embezzlement." I reached into my bag and pulled out copies of some of the documents I'd photographed. I showed her the fake IDs, the plane tickets, the bank transfer information. With each proof, I watched her dreams crumble like autumn leaves. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked through tears. "Why would his wife want to help me?" "Because we're both victims here," I said, "and because you're carrying an innocent child who doesn't deserve to be born amid lies and criminal prosecution. You need to know the truth so you can make decisions about your future." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us absorbing the magnitude of William's betrayal. Finally, Victoria spoke again. "What will happen to him, to us, to the baby?" "William's going to prison," I said honestly. "As for you and the baby, that's up to you. But Victoria, you're young, clearly intelligent and capable, and you have a family who can help you get through this. You don't need William Hayes to survive." As if summoned by our conversation, a car pulled up in Victoria's driveway. A middle-aged woman got out, took one look at Victoria's tear-stained face and my presence, and immediately knew something was terribly wrong. "Victoria, dear, "What's going on?" the woman asked, running over to us. "Mother," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "This is Eleanor Hayes. She is William's wife. Do you think the truth is always kinder than a lie, even when it hurts?" Victoria's mother, Mrs. Patricia Summers, as she introduced herself, listened with growing horror as I explained the situation. Her protective maternal instincts kicked in immediately. "We're getting you out of this house today," she told Victoria firmly. "You're coming home with me until we decide what to do next. And Victoria, darling, I'm sorry to say this, but I never trusted that man. Something about him always seemed too good to be true." While Victoria packed her essentials, her mother and I talked quietly on the front porch. "Thank you for coming here," Mrs. Summers said. "I know it must not have been easy for you, considering everything that happened. But Victoria needed to know the truth before it was too late." "I couldn't let her find out from strangers," I replied. "She's been fooled enough." That afternoon, I returned home to Meadowbrook with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. I had done everything I could to protect Victoria and my own children. Now I had to face what came next. I arrived home to find 2 FBI agents waiting for me in the living room. Agent Coleman stood up when I entered, her expression a mix of relief and professional concern. "Mrs. Hayes, we need to talk," she said. "The arrests went smoothly. William and Frank Morrison are in federal custody, but there were some complications." My blood ran cold. "What kind of complications?" "When we searched your husband's desk at the bank, we found a loaded gun and what appears to be a detailed plan to stage his death to look like an accident. Mrs. Hayes, you weren't just in mortal danger. William had already begun planning exactly how to do it." The room seemed to spin around me. Even though I'd known about the death threat in Frank's note, I hadn't fully grasped how close I'd come to death. "The plan was set for this weekend," Agent Coleman continued. "A staged car accident on the winding road between here and Columbus. If you hadn't come forward when you did, you might not have survived until November. Have you ever realized that your own intuition saved your life?" That night, after the FBI agents left, and I managed to get Thomas and Sarah fed and settled, despite their confusion about where Dad was, I sat alone in the living room and finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened. Within 2 weeks, I discovered my husband was a thief, a liar, and a possible murderer. I gathered evidence that would have sent him to prison for years. I warned his pregnant lover and helped her escape his web of lies. And I saved not only my life, but possibly the lives of my children and Victoria as well. But now came the hard part, explaining to Thomas and Sarah that their father wasn't coming home, and figuring out how to rebuild our broken family. As I sat there in the silent house, I remembered my mother's words about women needing skills in their hands. Tomorrow, I would begin using those skills not just to hem dresses and mend clothes, but to stitch together a new life from the torn pieces of our old one. Do you believe that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover who you really are? 6 months after William's arrest, on a rainy April morning in 1976, my carefully reconstructed life was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch for Thomas and Sarah during spring break, when there was a knock on our door. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman holding a baby, both drenched by the torrential rain. It took me a moment to recognize Victoria, looking thinner and more mature than the last time I'd seen her, a bundle of blankets in her arms. I opened the door immediately. "Victoria, come in, get out of the rain." "Is that?" "This is baby William," she said, coming through our doorway and unwrapping the blankets, revealing a beautiful, dark-haired, serious-looking baby. "He's 3 months old. And Mrs. Hayes, Eleanor, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know where else to turn." I led her into the living room, where Thomas and Sarah looked up from their board game with curious expressions. They had heard me mention Victoria before, but this was the first time they had seen their father's other wife and her half-brother. "Children, this is Victoria and this is baby William," I said carefully. "They need our help today." Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing seemed completely impossible? As Victoria told me her story, my heart ached for her all over again. After baby William was born, her parents initially supported her, helping with expenses and childcare. But as the scandal surrounding William's crimes continued to dominate the local media, his father became increasingly uncomfortable with his grandson being named after a convicted criminal. "He said it would be better for everyone if I put the baby up for adoption," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "He thinks no one will ever hire me or want to marry me if I constantly remind them of William Hayes. My mother tried to reason with him, but..." She stopped talking, rocking baby William gently as he began to fuss. "But you don't want to give it up," I said. It wasn't a question. "I can't," she whispered. "He's my son, but I have no money, no job qualifications, and nowhere to go. I'm staying at a women's shelter in Columbus, but they can only keep us for a few more days." I looked at that young woman, little more than a girl, really, holding her innocent baby, and I saw myself 6 months ago, desperate, scared, with no clear path forward. The difference was that I had a house, some savings, and children old enough to understand basic explanations. Victoria had nothing but the clothes on her back and a 3-month-old baby who depended entirely on her. "What kind of work did you do before?" I asked. "I was a secretary at an insurance company," she said. "But when the story about William came to light, they let me go. They said my association with criminal activity made me unsuitable for a position that required trust and discretion. The injustice of it made my blood boil. Victoria had been as much a victim of William's lies as I had been, and yet she was being punished for crimes she had never committed. "Victoria," I said, making a decision that would surprise us both, "what do you think about staying here for a while, just until you recover?" Her eyes widened in shock. "Here? But why would you want to help me? I'm the reason your marriage ended. I'm the woman who..." "You're the woman who was deceived and used, just like me," I interrupted. "And this baby is Thomas and Sarah's half-brother, whether either of us planned it or not. Do you think forgiveness is something we do for others or something we do for ourselves?" Thomas, who had been listening silently while pretending to concentrate on the board game, suddenly spoke. "Is he really our brother?" he asked, walking over to baby William to observe him with scientific curiosity. "He's your half-brother," I explained. "He has the same father as you, but a different mother." Sarah, always more emotionally direct than her older brother, simply announced, "He's cute. Can I hold him?" And just like that, my children accepted what the adult world considered scandalous and complicated. To them, baby William was simply their little brother who needed care and protection. That afternoon, I helped Victoria settle into our guest room, the room that had previously been William's office, which I'd already cleared of his belongings and converted into a sewing room. We moved the sewing machine to the basement and set up a crib I'd borrowed from our neighbor, whose children had outgrown it. Over the next few weeks, an unlikely routine developed. Victoria proved to have a natural talent for household management and childcare. While I worked on custom alterations and sewing to supplement our income, she kept our home running smoothly, prepared meals, and supervised Thomas and Sarah when they weren't at school. Most importantly, we discovered that our shared experience of betrayal had created an unexpected bond. We understood each other's pain in ways our friends and family couldn't. Victoria had lost her innocence and her faith in love. I had lost my trust and my sense of security. But together, we began to heal. "I keep thinking I should hate you," Victoria confessed one night as we folded laundry together while the kids did their homework at the kitchen table. You represent everything I thought I wanted: the settled wife, the real family, the rightful place in his life. And I still think I should hate you, I replied. You represent his choice to throw away everything we've built together. But hating you would be like hating another victim of the same crime. Have you ever found strength in the most unlikely places? The real breakthrough came when we received the news that William had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Victoria and I were called to testify during the trial, a painful process that forced us to relive our lies and confront William in person. He looked older, grayer, diminished in his prison uniform. When he saw Victoria and me sitting together in the courtroom, his face showed something I'd never seen before: genuine shame. After the sentencing, we stood together on the courthouse steps, 3 children between us, watching reporters take photos of the unusual family group. "What are you going to tell people?" Victoria asked. "About us living together and raising children together." "I'll tell them the truth," I said, "that sometimes the most unconventional families are the strongest. That sometimes God puts people in our lives in ways we never imagined, and it's our job to make the most of those gifts." By Christmas 1976, our household had settled into a rhythm that worked for everyone. Thomas and Sarah adored their little brother, taking turns helping with feedings and delighting in his first smiles. Victoria proved to be not only an excellent housekeeper, but a natural partner in my growing sewing business. She had a gift for dealing with clients, taking measurements, managing appointments, and managing the business side of things, something I always struggled with. While I focused on the creative work, designing custom dresses and executing complex fittings, Victoria took care of everything else. "We should make this official," she said one day as we tallied our earnings for the previous month. "A real partnership, equal shares, both our names on the deal." I looked at that young woman who had arrived on my doorstep 6 months ago, with nothing but a baby and a broken heart, and who had transformed into someone I trusted with my livelihood and the well-being of my children. "Hayes and Summers Custom Tailoring," I suggested. "Sounds nice. Do you believe that some partnerships are meant to heal what has been broken?" The business grew beyond anything I could have imagined. The fame of the 2 women who created beautiful clothes at fair prices spread throughout Columbus and neighboring cities. We hired more seamstresses, rented our own space for the store, and even began creating a small line of ready-to-wear pieces. But the most important growth happened in our family. Baby William took his first steps in our living room, with Thomas cheering and Sarah clapping. He said his first word, "Mama," to Victoria, but his second was Nora, his version of Eleanor. Thomas excelled in school and began talking about studying engineering in college. Sarah's artistic talents blossomed, and she began creating fashion sketches that inspired some of our most popular designs. And little William grew into a happy, confident child who felt equally comfortable in Victoria's arms or mine. The scandal that initially threatened to destroy our lives gradually faded into local history. New scandals captured the town's attention, and people began to see us not as the dishonored wife and the fallen lover, but as 2 hard-working women raising children and running a successful business. Have you ever discovered that your greatest trial became your greatest blessing? In 1979, 3 years after Victoria first showed up on my doorstep, we received an unexpected visitor. William had received a day pass to attend his father's funeral and asked to see the children. The man who knocked on our door bore little resemblance to the confident banker who had planned my murder. Prison had aged him decades, and his eyes held a weariness that betrayed deep regret. "I know I have no right to ask," he said, standing awkwardly in the front hallway, "but I wanted to see how everyone was doing, to apologize, if you'll let me." "Thomas, now 16 and taller than his father, looked at William coldly and appraisingly. Sarah, 13 and wise beyond her years, remained close to me, and little William, now 3, peered out from behind Victoria's skirts, curious about this stranger who was making all the adults in the room tense. "I destroyed our family," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I put you in danger, Eleanor. I lied to you, Victoria. I chose greed and selfishness over love and responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed everyone to know that I understand what I did and that I'm sorry." The apology seemed genuine, but it was too little, too late. The man standing at our door was no longer the William Hayes we knew. He was a broken stranger, asking for absolution from the people whose lives he had nearly destroyed. "We've moved on," I told him simply. "The children are happy, healthy, and loved. Victoria and I have built something good from the wreckage you left. That's all you need to know." Have you realized that forgiveness does not require forgetting, and healing does not require reconciliation? Today, as I sit in the sunroom of the beautiful house Victoria and I bought together in 1985, watching my grandchildren play in the garden we planted with our own hands, I marvel at the journey that has brought us here. Hayes & Summers Custom Tailoring has become one of Ohio's most successful women-owned businesses. We've expanded to 3 locations, employing over 30 seamstresses, and have even had our designs featured in regional fashion magazines. Thomas became an engineer, as he always dreamed, and now designs bridges that span rivers and valleys. Sarah became a fashion designer and studied in New York and Paris before returning home to work with us. And little William, now 47, became an entrepreneur who eventually took over the operations side of our company when Victoria and I were ready to step back. Victoria never remarried, though she had opportunities. "Why would I need another husband?" she joked, "when I have a partner who actually keeps her promises." We raised our children together, celebrated graduations and weddings together, and supported each other through all the joys and sorrows that followed. What began as a desperate alliance between 2 women betrayed by the same man evolved into one of the strongest partnerships I've ever known. The truth is that William's betrayal, as devastating as it was at the time, led Victoria and I to lives we never could have imagined. We discovered strengths we never knew we would have, created a business that supported several families, and built a family structure that, while unconventional, was filled with love and mutual support. The note that was supposed to seal my death sentence actually became the catalyst for my liberation and the beginning of a life more fulfilling than any I could have planned. If you're facing betrayal, if your world has been turned upside down by lies and deceit, I want you to know that survival is possible. More than that, transformation is possible. The person who emerges from the ashes of betrayal can be stronger, wiser, and more capable than the one who lived in ignorance. Share this story with someone who needs to know that the current crisis can be the gateway to your greatest triumph. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to the Grandma's Diaries channel. Share it with a woman who needs a reminder that she's stronger than she thinks. And tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered that your greatest pain became your greatest blessing? Because sometimes, my dears, God allows our lives to be turned upside down so that we can finally see what truly matters. And what truly matters can never be stolen, betrayed, or destroyed. It's true love, real family, the faith that sustains us when everything falls apart, and the courage of a woman who decides she will not die for anyone's convenience. Until next week, when I'll tell you about the secret diary I found in the attic of my Phoenix home 30 years after Roberto's arrest. What was written in those pages revealed that he had been keeping an even greater secret, one that would change our understanding of everything we live.